Hello, welcome to today's talk. Today we're going to be speaking about two different sets of ideas which are connected with each other. The first one is our perception of God and different levels. If you remember the lecture we gave about the fifth dimension and the idea of different levels of ranging from absolute evil to absolute good, and the five different stages of that array of ideas, right? You've got the three in the middle, you've got the two extremes. So go over that one if you want to fully appreciate what we're going to speak about today. Right. So the first idea we're going to be speaking about is our awareness of God, and the second one is our practical trust in God. Okay, and we're going to speak about also a range of different levels where a person can achieve and work higher and higher levels to get to an extremely high level of trust in God. Okay, so we'll start off with the first idea. The first idea is the idea of Emunah. Emunah, we mentioned this before, the idea of trust, it's really belief in God. We're going to speak about the idea of knowledge and belief in another lecture, when we're going to go through a lecture about different proofs for God. But for the purposes of this lecture, we'll just keep it simple, right? There is the idea of knowledge of God, right, and believing in God. Right? What's the difference between the two? You can get people who don't know about God at all. So therefore, I'm kind of hinting about the 5 different levels here. Right, the first level obviously is the one where people don't know about God at all, right? And then you've got the concept that people know about God. You've got, again, it's a whole spectrum. You've got people who are aware there might be a God, there's a discussion about it. And then you've got knowledge based. That's I would say it's a unique thing in Judaism. Other religions would argue with that. I'm not going to demonstrating what the fundamental difference is between us claiming to know God and other religions also claiming to know God. Really, they're going on blind faith, essentially. It's complex to work out with every religion, but you'll see if you boil them down, you always end up having an element of having to just believe something based on blind faith, whereas the fundamentals of our religion, you can demonstrate them logically or intellectually, which, as we said, we're going to address in a different lecture. So people can know about God, maybe yes, maybe not, and then when a person goes through all the different types of evidence and he realizes, yeah, okay, intellectually speaking, yeah, there is a God, right? And the God of the Torah, we take it further, the Jewish conception of God, yeah, we know it. The problem is, there's a difference between knowledge and emunah, conviction of your knowledge. A person can know there's a God, but cognitive dissonance might make him act differently. There's a story, for example, of I think it was Aristotle actually, where he was giving a whole big philosophical talk to students about how great the human being is, how lofty, how godly, or whatever, how spiritual and transcendent the human being is, right? And how above whatever it was. And then after the lecture, some of his students found him, let's say, doing an inappropriate act with an animal. I'll leave it, well, I better not leave it to your imagination, but you can imagine what I might be talking about. Don't try imagining it, not good. And they asked him, what's this? How can you do that? You've just been speaking about the loftiness of man and things like that. And now you're going on and you're doing this very base, very very degraded, very downright low act. And he said, when I was giving the lecture, that was Aristotle the philosopher. Now I'm Aristotle the human. Okay, there you go. So you got the idea of a person can know very, very lofty ideas, but it doesn't affect them at all. Yeah. That's the idea, like the smoker who knows it's bad to smoke. Yeah, he's learned all the evidence of the dangers of smoking, right? But and then he finds another piece of article and he takes out a cigarette, smoking it while he's reading it. What's going on here? How can you do that? It's because of the idea of cognitive dissonance. A person puts aside what he knows in his head, but he acts based on emotions. So there's a problem there. So knowledge is not good enough, right? Our job, think about the interaction of the soul and the body, by the way, here. We've got to take the spiritual idea and drive it into our physical emotions, right? We spoke about this, about the three souls, the mind, the heart, and the body itself. But this goes along that sort of line about we're trying to drive a higher concept and manifest it in something much more physical. Right? So we can know, once a person knows that there's a creator, right? Knows the Jewish conception of God, that there's a creator who wants a relationship with us, then the job is to internalize that. And emunah, faith, as it's translated, probably not the best word, probably means belief with conviction. That means you don't just believe it intellectually, you live it, you feel it. You feel this truth, you feel it in the heart. Right? And this is very, very hard. The distance between the mind and the heart is one of great distance. So our job is to take the knowledge which we have in our minds and then transfer it into our heart, where we internalize it, so that God is not just a theoretical idea, it's a living concept which God's real. He's not just this idea, oh, you can't see him, yeah, God, okay, let's just do lip service and just go through the motions serving God. So no, he's real. He's right here with us. He's creating us at this very moment. He keeps recreating the world every moment. He's interested in us. He listens to what we say, our prayers. Yeah, he's watching our actions. He's guiding us to help us become better people by arranging the events around us to help us, getting us physical things which we need in order to succeed in our development of our character, sending us the right people at the right time, sending us the right tests at the right time. Yeah, God's constantly involved in us. Now, when a person's living on that level, the whole awareness of reality is completely different. It's not just, yeah, there's a God. It's like God's with me now, right? Even though we can't sense him directly through our senses, but that knowledge, which we have, that abstract knowledge, we feel that abstract knowledge, we drive it, and we consolidate it, and we make it part of who we are. Right? It becomes one with how we perceive the world. Right? So that's the idea of knowledge translated into emotions. Right? And conviction. That's where conviction comes from. Yeah. So if a person's got to give up their life, al kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name. Let's say some people saying, bow down to this idol or we'll kill you. Right? If a person's just got in his intellect, they'll think, well, okay, I know that God's true, so I really shouldn't do it, but right? Where a person's got conviction, they say, what's the question? Of course I'll give up my life. There's no question. Right? It's obvious. Right? Yeah, because the reality of God is more real than a person's own perception of self when you get to a very high level of recognition of the truth of God. Okay, so that's the driving into the heart. But then there's a final sort of, not nail in the coffin, that's not the right way to say it. The final hammer blow, there's a final peg, right, in the, I don't know what you put pegs into. A final rung in the ladder, right? The pinnacle is when a person doesn't just believe it, he starts acting differently because of his conviction, his knowledge. For example, if he knows that God says, right, I'll take care of you whatever the situation is, don't worry about you your livelihood and stuff like that. Don't go over the top and work like a 12-hour job just to live, to get money. Don't worry, you won't be able to develop spiritually like that unless you do it while you're working. Yeah, there is an idea when you're working, you're doing kindness to others, you're helping out your boss. If you're, I don't know, even if you're stacking shelves in the supermarket, yeah, every time a person finds the thing in the right place, you've helped them. Essentially, everything you do, you can always do in a way where you are bringing godliness into the world and helping others. It's always possible in everything you do. We might have mentioned this idea on the Lishma, doing things altruistically lecture. I can't remember, but it definitely comes into that. So the idea of trusting God, that means instead of spending, like, let's say this is an example which is close to me. This is a decision I had when I was much younger, right? Am I going to go to university, spend 3, 4, 5 years learning how to do a very high skilled job, like an intellectual job, and then after that I could get a lot of money and things like that, but it takes so much of my time up. In the meantime, I could have been studying Torah, improving myself, my character. So that's a balance. Now, the person who thinks that they're in charge of their destiny, right, and God's not there to help them, right, or even if he knows he's there to help them, but you can't put yourself on the line, you can't risk it just in case it's not true that God's going to help you get your livelihood. They'll say, well, I've got to work, I've got to go and try my best, and I've got to push to get the best job. I've got to, but that brings a person, maybe not only does he end up spending a lot of time doing things which are not necessary, right? He might end up doing the wrong thing. Yeah, if a person's desperate, he might cheat on his papers. He might if he's got to get top in the class to get a certain level of recognition for people looking for him at the jobs, he might try sabotaging the person who maybe is his competitor in the class. Yeah, he might do underhanded things just to get ahead. I say, well, it's parnasa, it's livelihood, right? I've got to do my hishtadlus, as they say. I've got to do my effort, right? But if you truly had faith that God's planned everything out for you, you can't do anything to get ahead through your own free will, right? Because the results are totally in God's hands. He's the one controlling the world. He's already preordained how much money you're going to get this year, how easy your life's going to be in terms of livelihood. And yeah, so you say, okay, so why should I do something wrong to get the money when I would have got the money anyway, right? Why should I sacrifice my integrity by being dishonest in business, right? Because I need to get my livelihood. But if you truly trust in God, you'll get that livelihood even if you don't do the wrong thing. So that's what trust in God is all about, right? You got to know this idea as well, though. You got to know the idea that God is actually going to help you. Obviously, if a person doesn't know that God's going to help him, then the logical thing to do is to try himself and put as much effort in. Okay, not doing anything forbidden or underhanded, but he'll feel that the burden of doing work is firmly on his shoulders, and he's got to try his best. But if we understand the only thing God actually asks us to do is do good and not bad, and everything else he'll take care of, okay, if you know that, then why put in the extra mile when instead at that time you could actually be doing something, a more of a spiritual pursuit? Okay, and obviously we're not talking about people who, while they're doing these physical efforts to get money, they're those people who are doing it in a mindset. We're going to speak about it later. There is a level where a person's doing it with a correct mindset, where it's actually a good thing to do, to put effort, more effort in possibly as well to what you're doing. But that's going to be in the second half of the lecture today, right? But the basic idea is the idea of bitachon, about trusting God, right? So you've got the idea of knowledge of God, you've got the idea of conviction and faith in God. Faith means, in this context, you believe in God intellectually, yeah, because you believe it makes sense. Then you have faith in God, and you trust in God, right? But the faith is not baseless. The faith is because you know God's real. He runs the world, and you feel He's real because you've internalized the idea. Then you trust in Him, right? Based on what He told you that He'll do for you, right? And you see that this is actually what the verse in Deuteronomy 4:39, the 4th chapter, 39th verse in Parshas Va'eschanan. And we've actually seen these verses before, so we won't spend too much time on them. I think it was in relation to this idea as well. We actually mentioned this idea in another lecture. Can't remember which one. It speaks about in this chapter 4 all about the giving of the Torah, the revelation of God at Sinai. The Ten Commandments are actually in the next chapter, I believe. It's chapter 5 is actually where the recounting of the giving of the Ten Commandments is, right? Because in Deuteronomy it's basically a repetition. It's a summary of the whole Torah. So it's going to mention the key events, including going out of Egypt of the Jewish people and the giving of the Torah. And it says, so as we see here, from the heavens you made your voice heard in order to instruct you, right? And He showed His fire and you heard His words from within the fire, and He took you out of Egypt, right? In order to inherit the nations, to go into the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, as it was called then, the land of Israel later. And you should know today, and then you should bring it down, you should return it, that means you should put it down into your heart and consider it in your heart. It means to internalize it in your heart. Ki Hashem hu Elokim, because God is Elokim, He is the source of all powers in the world. That's what the name Elokim represents. Lord, He is God, is absolutely meaningless because it doesn't translate the words at all. Lord and God are such obscure terms. But Hashem, that's God's actual name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the 4-letter name. We don't say it with a hey because we don't even want to say the 4 letters in a row, Yud and then a hey and then a Vav and then a hey. So instead, for short, instead of saying the hey, we say K, sort of like, instead of a hey, we do a kuf. So Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's how we say it. Or Yud and hey, Vav and hey. Okay, that is God representing Hoyahova V'yiyah, above time. He was, He is, and He will be, and He brings everything. He's Mahava Kol. He brings everything into existence. That God, which is at the source of everything, Hu Elokim, He is the one who is in charge of all the aspects of the forces of nature, right? As we spoke about in the lecture about miracles in nature. Bashamayim in Ma'al, heavens above, V'al Haaretz Mitochas, and in the earth below, Ein Oid, there's nothing else. So we see very clearly from this verse, this idea we're talking about, right? You should know, that means knowledge is based on evidence, that God is the one in charge of all the forces of nature. That means it's not just God created the world and went away, let it run by itself, or He's there watching. No, He's actively involved in nature, and He's actually doing everything, right? And that means in things which God didn't command me to do, for example, to go and spend 10 hours working to get money, well, then why am I doing it? God's in charge of everything anyway, right? It's all God anyway. So, Ki Hashem hu Elokim, in the heavens above and down here in the earth, there's nothing else. That's the idea of the third Keystone lecture. That's the idea of Gilu Yichud, that there's nothing else except God, right? Whether in terms of, on the abstract level, there's no other true existence besides God, as you explained in the second Keystone lecture, yeah? From God's point of view, there isn't anything else, there's no change. The change only happens for us, only we perceive a change, like God's doing stuff, right? And there's a change in the world, the other creations. It's only from our point of view, because the whole world was created for the sake of human beings. So that's the only place where any change actually takes. It's on the human being revelation level, as we called it, right? But Einoid, it also means, as we spoke about there in lectures 3a and also 3b, that there's no other power. That means there's no other thing which influences the world except God. We spoke a bit about that. We touched on it. I didn't go into as much detail as I wanted to in the lecture about free will and God's foreknowledge, right? We explained that the ultimate truth is God does everything, but from our side of the coin, there is another thing called absolute pure free will, right? And the question is how to put them together. We spoke about the Mobius strip, the idea of paradoxes there. But leaving that all aside, the idea is that we have to know intellectually and then drive it, then have the faith and the belief. But it's only as a product and as a manifestation in our emotions of that prior knowledge which we had absolutely clear, which we worked out intellectually and logically. And we had a rational reason behind it. No such thing as someone telling us something and we just believe it. That's just not how it works. Yeah, because lots of people can say lots of things, and who knows whether they're telling the truth or not. Oh, he's so honest. Yeah, lots of people are honest, but you find out later they're actually very deceptive. They're actually lying, but they gave the facade of being honest. So it has to be something which you know clearly is true, or at least, as we're going to speak about in the proof and the evidence lectures, something which at least on balance is true. Okay, so Yodata Yom, you have to know, that means intellectual knowledge. Then you drive it into your heart. That means you experience it, you live it, you feel. That's Emunah, that is faith or conviction, belief with conviction. That means not just belief intellectually, believe with conviction. You feel it and you're willing to put yourself out on it. But then you've got actual trust. That's when you actually carry that out. And then you've got a situation, and if you didn't have this level of conviction, you would act one way. But because of this, you put yourself on the line and you risk everything, or you risk a bit at least, based on your level of conviction to this trust. And that is called Bitachon, that is called trust. Okay, so you've got knowledge, conviction, and then physical change in behavior based on this knowledge which we call trust or Bitachon. Okay, so that's those three levels, and yeah, I'm sure if you think about it, you can kind of see how they kind of fit into the 5 different levels we spoke about in the 5th dimension array lecture. So now we're going to go on to Bitachon itself, the idea of trusting. There's different levels of trusting God, right? And now we'll see a bit clearer the 5 levels, at least in this spectrum. So there's 5 levels of trusting God and realizing how deeply He is involved in running the world. Okay, so before we start, we have to come with the starting premise, which is, I'm not going to go into here too much, is that God is the only power which does everything. Okay. Right, so there's 5 levels of how we internalize that and act upon it. So the first level is obviously the lowest level, is people who don't believe God's doing anything. In fact, some people don't even believe in God. So obviously there is that level. That's a very, very low level. That's the first of the 5 levels of complete absence of knowledge. So obviously they believe the world works through nature, and nature is a power in itself, right? It can't change, which is obviously wrong, because whatever your religion is, you know there is such a thing as miracles, things which can't be explained by nature, whether it's out-of-body experiences or open miracles, or at least miracles which can't be explained easily by natural things. Yep. Witchcraft. People have witchcraft or things like that, or what's it called? Things, demons, ghosts. There's all varying levels of evidence of these sort of what are they called? Metaphysical, the surreal. I'm not sure what the word is. I'm sure there's a very good word for these sort of things, right? Okay, supernatural. That's the word, right? Right. Anyway, but we're not getting into that again. And we're going to do, hopefully, please God, a whole series of lectures with the different ideas of bring different types of evidence and proof for the spiritual, for God, and for the Torah. Okay, so that's the first level, non-belief. The second one is that people believe in God, right? But they might believe that God doesn't interfere with nature at all. Right? It's got nothing to do with it. So I would say that might even be the same as the first level. So let's move on. There's a higher level than that people believe that, God's involved in the world, but how? There is such a thing as nature. The world runs by itself. But God, if you pray really hard, you can tell him not to interfere. Don't interfere. Sometimes God can interfere with things, right? Right? Nature is a strong force. But then they believe, but God can come and sort of interfere in the situation, right? And so when people pray on that level, they're praying, God, don't make it go wrong. Yeah, it's like the horse racer, right? The person's gambling on a horse. He takes his life savings, gambles on the horse. He's praying, right, to God. Yeah, can you make it just get out the stalls? Yeah, we spoke about this once before. This parable, right? And then he gets out, and they say, "Oh, can you please just make sure it doesn't fall too far behind, right? Just to put my mind at rest." And sure enough, it's with the pack. All right, can we just give it like a header, So it's like a header of the other horses, so it pushes slightly to the front. So can you give it a whole length? So it goes a whole length in front. And they said, could you make it like 3 lengths? Yeah, and the whole home straight now, right? So okay, right, God, just let it be now. Don't interfere anymore, God. Right, just let it run as it is, right? So what's going on there? Because really deep down, he's believing that at the end, he's believing that God can interfere with it, right? But really, he's in control in his mind. Everything, nature's going to take care of it. Just, God, don't mess it up. Don't make him trip over. Don't do an act of God, as people say. Right? We spoke about this idea in the lecture about David and King David and Gog, but the idea of gratitude. Yeah, the way King David looks at the world is anything which happens is God doing stuff for him, actively being kind to him, whereas the other people David's referring to look at the world as, well, the world should be naturally in a state where we're getting what we want, but God can mess things up. We say an act of God, right? That's a very low level of belief in God's action and influence in the world. That means the world is what it is, and God can interfere. Okay. The third level is already a much higher level, and we say most people who believe in God on a deep level, more or less somewhere in this category, whether lower or higher. That's the idea that they see God using nature as a tool. Okay, So it's not just that nature is a thing in itself, right? And God can come along and start fighting against nature. It said, no, on the contrary, God's the one in charge. But nature is God's way of running the world, right? So if you think about an analogy of a person looking through a keyhole, right? He's looking through a keyhole and he sees there's someone writing with a pen there, writing a letter. But he doesn't see the person. He only sees the pen and says, oh, what an amazing pen. That pen's just writing the letter by itself. That's the previous level. That's the idea that nature's working by itself. You don't see there's someone holding the pen. But if you look more carefully, you open the door and say, oh, actually, there's someone holding the pen. So the pen is just the tool of the writer. Okay? But that means that you're understanding that there is a separate thing called nature, and God sort of needs to use nature excuse me, to manipulate events, right? So he guides nature. That's what he does. He's using nature as a tool, right? But nature's a real thing which is independent of him, but he's got total influence over nature. It's not just that he can interfere with nature, right? That nature's got its own mind and God sort of nudges it in one direction or the other and makes things go wrong, right? God actually guides nature directly. He says, I want nature to do this now and that. I want this person to bump into him, and they start talking, and he'll get a job from that, etc., etc. Yeah, that's God using nature as a tool. There's a higher level than that. This is what I'm going to call the fourth level, where nature isn't real at all. It's an illusion. So the example of this would be one of the famous examples is Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, a famous rabbi in the times of the Mishnah, right? We find many stories about him, and he was essentially a miracle worker, right? He was someone who you went to pray, and his prayers got answered even miraculously. There's many stories about him. So there's one story where he was a very poor person, right? The way to understand that is if a person gets his prayers answered, it's because he's such a humble person. He's just like a channel for God's energy to go to others, but he himself doesn't hold on to that energy, because if he held on, then it wouldn't be a channel anymore. So therefore he himself was actually very poor. So there's a story where he was so desperate one week that when it came to doing the Shabbos preparations, in Judaism we light candles on the entrance of the Sabbath on Friday afternoon. The women light the Shabbos candles, and the ideal way to light them is actually using olive oil. That's the ideal, right? As opposed to wax candles. There's nothing wrong with wax candles, it's just like the best way to do it is with the oil, right? The problem is they didn't have any oil in the house, and how are they going to light the Shabbos candles, right? So his wife or his daughter came to him and said, we don't have any oil, what are we going to do? Right? He says, do you have any vinegar? Yeah, we've got vinegar. Okay. So Mish Omar l'shemen v'yadlik, Yomar l'chometz v'yadlik. The same one who says that oil should burn, he'll say that vinegar burns as well. So just take vinegar and use the vinegar as the fuel for the light. And obviously vinegar doesn't burn, right? And they did that and it worked. Because the way he looked at nature, right? He said, nature's not real. God says, God's the one in charge. He's the one who created nature. So you can say, okay, you created nature. I want to run the world with nature. Now God can say easily, okay, we'll get rid of nature for the time being, right? How was he able to do that? From Rabbi Tatz, only someone who is on that level where if he saw an open miracle, he wouldn't even flinch slightly. Yeah, obviously, most of us would see an open miracle and we would be slightly impressed. Yeah, So obviously that's too much already. Already we're not on that level. Yeah, slightly press. Oh, that's nice. God doing that, right? Right. A person's got to be on the level where, yeah, okay. What's the problem? I don't see anything magical happening here. God's the one's in charge of everything. There's no such thing as nature. So therefore, yeah, like vinegar, like oil, like whatever, it's always going to work. There's no reason intrinsically why it should not work, because there's no such thing as nature. That is this fourth level, where nature ceases to be seen as anything at all. It's not even a tool in God's hand, right? God doesn't need tools. It's just an illusion. God's always acting directly in the world. Yeah, so it's not just nature's a thing and he can interfere. It's not even like God's tool to manipulate events. Like he needs an intermediate, he needs a pen to do it, right? He needs a tool. God doesn't need a tool. God just does it directly. So therefore nature is just, so what is nature? Nature's an illusion to give free will. But for someone who already sees through the mask, through the facade of this lie, which is nature, so God doesn't need to hide anymore. What's the point of me hiding it? I'm only hiding it because it'll take away people's free will. He already realizes he's seen the trick, right? It's like someone's doing a magic trick, and you actually caught him sort of like putting the stuff, like hiding it behind his head, like through sleight of hand. They say, "Oh, it's gone." Yeah, but if you know it's the back of his head, there's no point trying to pretend anymore. You've seen through the trick, right? So God says, "Okay, so I don't need to hide anymore," right? Because Rabbi Chinuch ben Dosa was on that level of awareness and perception that God does everything directly, and nature is completely just a misdirect. Now, so what is nature? So you thought that's the highest level possible, but there's actually one other level which is higher. The idea of saying that nature is something, but it's something which I want to show is God. Remember we spoke about the idea of Gilu Yichud. That's the highest level of recognizing God's oneness is when there's a potential antagonist to God's all power, and God reveals that even that antagonist is actually doing what God wants, right? So we spoke about many examples of this. One example is the person who's doing the sin, right? And God says, right, so I want you to, I'm letting him do the sin, right? Because what's going to happen later is through his suffering, which is going to be caused through the sin. Let's think of a simple example, right? A person, like a wicked person hits a righteous person. And because of that, the righteous person had to go to hospital or something like that. And because of that, he met up with someone who was able to teach him new ideas or to guide him on a path to get into an even higher level. So we see that God was actually arranged for that evil person, right, who thought he was rebelling against God, but he was actually doing exactly what God wanted, right? And you can look at it from the side of the wicked person himself. When the wicked person thinks, "Oh right, I'm going to hit this righteous person now," and then he realizes that people look down on him. Is that such a one minute? I didn't realize you were so pro these righteous people, and that really the reason is because he just did something not nice. But then he starts thinking, he starts waking up and thinking, "Oh, 1 minute. Maybe I did the wrong thing. Maybe I should think about carefully what I did. Maybe I went a bit too far this time." So you see from the evil action itself, that is a cause of coming closer to God. So the way that the people on this top highest level look at the world is they look at nature as something which is real, but it's something which is not just a tool of God, which we want to transcend that way of looking at it because it implies that God needs nature. they look at nature as something which opposes God superficially, and they want to go through the process of showing how really nature is a manifestation of God in such a way where nature itself becomes a vehicle to sanctify God's name. Not just, it sounds like the same as the third level, like God's using it as a tool, right? But when you look at it as a tool, you're looking at it, okay, God can control nature as something separate from him. He can sort of interfere and use nature for his own ends, right? Right? And the fourth level is, no, God doesn't need that. God can act directly, right? And nature's just there for some. The fifth level, you're elevating nature, and you're taking something which is potentially against God and you're elevating it and showing even something which can be against God is actually part of God doing everything. Right? Okay, so that's at the highest level. So the rabbis speak about there are four kings. There are four kings. You have King David, you have King Asa, King Yehoshofot, and King Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah. And it speaks about they did four things when they had to face enemies in battle, right? King David, when he went out, he would go and actually do war with his enemies physically. The second king was King Asa. He came out with his warriors, but he just stood still on the battlefield. He didn't actually attack. The third king, Yehoshofot, he didn't even go out to war. He just prayed to God, and God delivered his enemies in his hands. And King Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah, he did the most incredible thing. He just said, I'm going to sleep. I trust in God. He's going to take care of everything. Right? So we would think that King Chizkiyahu, he's the highest level. It's so clear to him that he didn't need to do anything, that he could just go to sleep. Totally peace of mind, sleep. And when he woke up, we know the amazing miracle. The whole army of Sancheriv was completely wiped out, except for 5 people. It was something like millions. It was in the hundreds of thousands or the millions of people in the army. It was a huge army. It was the world power at the time, and miraculously, out of nowhere, boom! They all just got wiped out, including princes from other nations who came to watch the spectacle of the conquest of Jerusalem, because Sancheriv already conquered most of the land of Israel before then, and now he's going to finish off and conquer the southern kingdom as well. And Chizkiyahu, who was the king there, he just went to sleep. So you think that's at the highest level. But the rabbis actually say that no, it's the other way around. I think Rav Dessler points this out. He says you're looking at it the wrong way. King David was the greatest, right? Because King David was on this 5th level, which we're talking about now. King David saw that when I go out to war, who's doing it? Is it me who's doing it, or is God doing it? Right? I could just easily just sit at home, right, and not do anything. I know God's going to take care of us. But I'm not being part of that. I'm not revealing a new facet of God's power. That God's power, it doesn't just ignore nature, right? But I can make nature a vessel to express God's power, right? So when David went into war and he took the sword and he swung the sword, his level of awareness was so high that he said, I'm picking up the sword, God's controlling my hand. I'm killing the person, God's controlling the sword, and he's making the sword go in the right place, right? And obviously he wasn't just doing it robotically, yeah? He's using all the skill, all the tactics of warfare, yeah? Because the tactics of warfare is all God. There's no other power except God. So therefore I'm going to do things the maximum level of hishtadlus. I'm going to use the maximum effort, right? And not just despite that, but through me using maximum effort, but realizing it's all God, I am actually sanctifying the laws of nature. I'm actually elevating the laws of nature. Just like with the idea of the eating we spoke about recently. Yeah, when you eat something, you bring it up to a higher level. So we're doing the same thing with our action, with his actions, King David, and with his understanding of the laws of nature, the laws of warfare, the idea of tactics, things which people look at as, well, nature. Well, you want to win a battle, you've got to be clever, you've got to know strategy, tactics. Why? Because that's how nature works. That's how normal people think. King David says, I'm going to show that, no, I'm going to show that what everyone else thinks are standalone concepts, I'm going to reveal through my awareness of God and how he runs the world, that I'm going to do everything which they do and show that it's really God who's doing it. Right? It'd be very hard to see it, but at least in his mind, he's attaching himself to God so deeply that his hand becomes a vessel for God's power. His sword becomes that, right? His mind, his tactics, his strategy, his quickness of action and rearranging his troops in the middle of battle, all of that, his speech, everything, he's got such a deep awareness that God's doing everything that all these seemingly natural events and causes and effects, it's all God. Yeah, because and David wouldn't fall into the trap of thinking that, but maybe if I try a bit too hard, then I'll feel when I'm actually slicing the guy's head off, whatever, right? Okay, that really feels like me doing it. So no, he had such a deep awareness of feeling one with God that I'm doing God's commandment to go to war in this situation, whatever it was, defense of the Jewish people or whatever the reason was for that specific war. Yeah, obviously everything he did was because God wanted him to, right? Protecting the nation against its enemies, right? So everything he did, right? So this is, I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm sanctifying mundane actions to become like commandments. I'm imbuing them with God's presence and awareness. Now, King Asa, he was on the lower level, right? He was a lower level. King Asa, he's felt that, okay, right, I realize God's in charge of everything. Everything I do is God. But the problem is, if I go out and start hitting, I feel that I'm the one choosing to pick up the sword and killing them. And maybe in the heat of battle, I'll start thinking, oh, it's me. My power is doing all of this, right? And then it would have been better than if he wouldn't have done it. Because he's distancing, he's cutting himself off from God. He's giving recognition to nature, to his own power, as apart from God. And that's bad. So I better not go that far. But I feel confident enough that if I come with my troops, right, that's a good way. Yeah, I'm starting the actions and the efforts of winning a battle, and I feel, yeah, at the end of the day, it's God's working through my effort here. But I can't go all the way into battle and start actually physically doing the war, because then I'd start feeling it's my own effort which is actually doing it. And then he's separating himself. He's separating nature and the natural laws of battle away from God. But actually standing there with his armies lined up, he found, yeah, that's good. Yeah, God's the one who's presenting us as a powerful army. The idea of setting up your war is also a very powerful thing. It scares the enemy and things like that. Yeah, so that's nature. But I believe that that's all God doing it, and the laws of scaring the enemy are just something which God decided to put in creation, in nature. So I'm showing that that's really God through King Asa's awareness of what reality was. Now you come to King Yehoshofot, King Jehoshaphat. He just prayed. He said that, look, if I do anything, I'm doing a physical action. That feels like me, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pray to God. Pray to God. And obviously when you're praying, that's not natural at all, right? So you just, God help us, right? Right? And obviously when he wins the war, he doesn't feel that it was him doing it, because he was praying for God to help him, and God helped him. So obviously it's God doing it, right? So the prayer already is bringing God, is showing that it's all God, right? Because you don't pray, you won't get the American army going to battle, right? They're all in their barracks. So, okay, we're going to win the war today. Everyone, let's go, pray. And they're all sitting there doing their prayers. And okay, finished. Okay, anyone want to go out for pizza? Because we won the war. We prayed, right? Right? They wouldn't do that. That's not good. Yeah, they wouldn't see that as natural, right? Yeah, that wouldn't be good enough for people who are in the world of nature. That's an unnatural thing to do. So King Jehoshaphat said, yeah, so I can handle that. I can handle doing prayer, right? Because that's just like that's clearly a supernatural way to act, right? Just praying and winning the battle like that. But if I'd actually do a physical action, I would think even bringing my armies out to battle would be too much of an effort. I'd feel that it's because we actually presented an intimidating army that we won the battle. Okay. But then you get into King Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah, right? And he literally just went to sleep. Why? Because he said that if I would pray, I would think, you know why we won the war? Because I prayed really well. Yeah, I listened to Rabbi Erskine's lecture about prayer, and I became one with God and totally nullify myself to God's will and connect with God on a deep level. Yes, it was my prayer which did it, right? Obviously, I'm joking, right? So King Hezekiah, he was on the lowest level. He thought that even if I'd pray, that's too much of an effort, right? I wouldn't be able to recognize the connection of God in the world, and my efforts, my hishtadlus, that's the word we use. Hishtadlus means our effort, and bitachon is having trust. Yeah, I would say that my hishtadlus to pray, to daven, that would be too much. I would think of that as me causing the victory, even though it's coming through God, but it's because I did something. It's coming from me to an extent. So he said, I'm just going to go to sleep and have total faith in God, which is very similar to the fourth level of Rabbi Chanin ben Dosa. Total miracles. I'm on the level to see that nature is an illusion. So if I'm totally okay going to sleep, right, because I realize that God's the one in charge, but if I would do anything, it would actually bring me down, right? It will bring me down to the third level. It will make me think that there is a power of nature, right? And I can get involved in it and I can manipulate it, right? That is essentially what the third level is that you see nature as a reality, and therefore the higher you are. So the way it works is like this: on the third level, the more refined you are in the third level, the less hishtadlus you're going to do, right? So if a person thinks, oh, I'm going to work 10 hours a day for my livelihood, a person on the high level says, no, 10 hours is too much. 5 hours, I think you can't get away with less than 5 hours. One person is a very high level. I'm going to work 1 hour a day. The rest of the day, I'm going to be just putting all my devotion and energy into serving God directly, spiritually, right? And then a person says, there's a story of Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, the head of the Muslim movement, so his teacher, Rav Zundel of Salant, I think this is what he did. He had such an incredibly high level of trust in God. His shtadlus, his effort to bring in his livelihood was to buy a lottery ticket. He said, well, I bought the lottery ticket. I've done my part. So God could give me my livelihood through winning the lottery. If he doesn't, obviously God didn't want me to get the money then. So what's the point of me doing another form? What, God couldn't have done it through the lottery ticket? Right? He could have done it through the lottery ticket just as much as he could have done for me working 100 hours this year. Right? Or 500 hours, whatever it is. Right? So on his level, he was very, very close to the fourth level. That he sees that nature is a facade. But he said, I've got to do something though, right? But I'm going to do the absolute minimum I need to do though, right? Because there is an idea of doing some sort of effort, because the reason why we have to put effort in to get livelihood emanates from the curse of Adam, right? God gave certain number of curses to Adam, and one of them is by the sweat of the brow you will get your livelihood, you will get your bread. So therefore there's a tax on mankind to have to put effort into them getting their livelihood. But obviously, imagine there's the country who says, okay, everyone's got to pay taxes. Okay, well, how much? However much you want, right? We're not going to tell you how much. It's a voluntary contribution, but you have to give something. So fine, okay, is 10 pence good enough? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, here's your 10 pence, right? And the person said, well, I don't think that's really enough. I need to pay a bit more, maybe £100, right? £100 as well. Ooh, person crazy. Well, why optionally pay a tax when you don't need to, right? The only reason why we have to do work is because of the curse. So why optionally do more of the curse? Have faith in God. Yeah, he's the one who's going to give you livelihood. And as it says in chapter 37 in Psalms, yeah, I was a young man and now I've got old, King David says. And I've never seen a righteous man who's been abandoned by God, or his children needing bread. God takes care of everyone, one way or the other. He might hide it sometimes. He might make a person struggle with his livelihood if he's not doing that much work, whatever, right? That's all to keep the balance of free will, right? But a person always gets his livelihood, unless it's a decree that's the person needs to suffer in a certain way. But otherwise, God takes care of everyone. Right, so therefore, Rav Zundel said, why should I do any effort? Okay, I've got to do some effort because God says, you've got to do something. Okay, I'll do something. I'll buy a lottery ticket. Could God give me my livelihood through the lottery ticket? Yes, okay, that's all enough. That's all you need to do then. Because I realize the reality is that God is totally in charge of everything, and I've got to pay a tax. Okay, I'll do a token paying tax. Well, come on, you got to do at least an hour work or something. Why? Well, you think God can't give me a livelihood if I didn't do that extra hour? Okay, so that's the idea of these levels here. Okay, so the higher a person is on the third level, the less effort he's going to be putting in, and the more faith and trust in God he's going to do. When you reach the fourth level, you're not doing any effort, right? Because you don't see any purpose in effort at all, because everything is miraculous anyway, right? So it's completely meaningless me doing anything, 100% meaningless. Once you go past that, then you think. Remember, we spoke about the level of David and Solomon in the eating lecture. Once a person has gone to a total level of purity that he's immune to the influence of the physical food. And here it'll be immune to the influence of nature and the idea of kochi v'yotzim yodi. It's my power which is doing this success. I'm being successful through my own efforts, which the Torah warns us about in, I think, chapter 11 in Deuteronomy, the beginning of Parshas Eikev. He warns us when you go into Israel, be careful not to think that you have such abundance and your flocks will increase and you have lots of silver and gold, and then your heart gets lofty and you say, oh, look, it did this. I did this. My power, my effort. Yeah, don't make that mistake. Yeah, remember God. Right? Oh, here we go. Right. Yes, it was actually chapter 8. Sorry about that. Okay. Be very careful. Chapter 8, verse 11. It starts really. This is Sheni, the second portion of the seven portions of this parsha, Parshas Eikev. Be careful not to forget God, lest you eat and become satisfied, and you build nice houses, and you've got lots of cattle and silver and gold. And your heart gets lofty, haughty, and you forget God, right, etc. And you'll say in your heart, Koichi, my strength, v'otzim yodi, and the might of my hand has accumulated the wealth. So they're looking, these people we're being warned not to be like these people who view our hishtadlus, our effort, as the cause for our success. Don't be like that. Don't forget God. Remember God. Because He's the one who gives you the power to make wealth. Okay, etc. Okay, He's the one who gives you the success. Don't fall into that trap. Right? He's the one who gives you power to do valor. And the Targum, the Unkel's translation on that pasuk, something like that. God's the one who puts in your mind the idea to buy wares, to buy schor, to buy items which you want to do business with. English is so bad. Sorry about that. Right? He's the one who puts in your mind, if a person, I'm sure you all know this situation where you buy something, yeah, and you're sure that this is the best thing to buy, and then almost straight away, or like a day later, 1 minute, why did I buy that? That was just what went through my mind to do that. There's the idea that there's a word in Yiddish or German that when a person gets an idea is called an Einfall. An Einfall is Ein in, Fall falls. It falls in. Where do we get our ideas from? Like you got this major stock trader or something on the stock exchange, right? And he thinks, I'm so clever. I know how to identify the best stocks and predict. These ones are going to go up in price soon, so I'll buy this one. He thinks he's doing it. Who put that brain in his head, which is doing all those thoughts? Who's actually right now? He could have easily not thought of that. God could have actually made him think about something else. He said, I'm hungry now, right? There's someone suggesting a trade. I'll think about it after lunch. And then he forgets about it. But God said, no, I'm going to make you think about it now. And God puts the idea in his brain. And he thinks, okay, this is a good opportunity. You see, God, remember the whole discussion about free will and foreknowledge. We can always assume that unless it's to do with our free will to do good or bad, it's God who's doing everything, even our thoughts, even our actions. Even when I do something, even that action is not really me. Except when it comes to free will. When it comes to doing good or bad, I've always got power over that. And essentially that's every moment, because a person, as we said, even if you do mundane actions, you can always be serving God. So you've always got the paradox, really, about free will and foreknowledge. But let's say a person's not thinking about God at all. He's not on that level. So really, God is the one who makes all these millionaires and billionaires successful, and that he's the one who makes all the poor people poor, because he puts the ideas in their head, the good ideas to the rich people, bad ideas to the poor people. Because that's the creed. God wants their purpose in life. I want him to have the challenges of a rich person. I want him to have the challenges of a poor person. He's the one who puts in your mind the idea to buy something. That's the idea of, he's the one who gives you the power to do valor. It means to even think of the idea to buy something. Even something as simple as that. It's not your idea, essentially. It's God giving you that idea in your head. It's really hard to feel that, because we feel that we're in charge of we're autonomous. We feel when I do something, the results are direct results of our actions. Then again, it's all to do with the sensitivity, how much you internalize this idea of God being all-powerful. And of course, on one level, we do have absolute free will, at least in the choosing good or bad. Whether we actually succeed in doing it, the person wants to give charity, but when he runs to the door after he's got the money, the poor person might have gone, okay, so you didn't succeed. But you chose to do good. And remember, choice is everything. As we spoke about many times, everything's down to our free will. That's the only thing which is important. We spoke about this a lot in 3A and especially in 3B of the Keystone lectures. The idea of free will being the only thing which has got any importance. So the people God warns us, don't be like a person who forgets about me, and then when he does his choices, he feels that I'm the one achieving. Remember, God's the one who puts all your thoughts in your head. He's the one who gives you the energy in your body. He created you with the brain to be a clever person who's good at trading, or who's skillful with his hands. People. That's where humility comes from. The Ramchal in the chapter about humility in Mesilas Yesharim, the path of the just, that's how he describes it. Why should a person ever be arrogant because he's clever, more good-looking, strength? These are nothing. There's nothing to do with him. Not to do with his free will, who he is. It's something which is given to him externally. It's like a bird being arrogant, saying, I can fly. What do you mean? That's your nature. That's how you're created. Obviously, there's nothing to do with you. It doesn't come from you. But the one time you can get arrogant to an extent is when it comes to your free will, as it says in the verse, Vayigba libo b'darchei Hashem, and his heart was lifted, or arrogant, if you want to translate it critically, right? It was lofty in the ways of God, because I chose the right thing, I did the right thing, and I'm proud of that, because on that level there is free will. Free will means something when you're talking about serving God and resisting evil. Otherwise, our free will, is a distraction from the reality, which means God's controlling everything. Right. So therefore, the higher a person is on the third level, the more he realizes it's not me. So what's the point of me doing? Why am I doing 5 hours? I could be doing 2 hours and learning an extra 3 hours a day. In fact, let's just buy a lottery ticket, and dedicate my whole life, except for that 1 minute going into the shop to buy the lottery ticket. Because God's going to provide for me either way. He's going to give me exactly the same amount of money, whether I do 100 hours work or 1 minute work, if you're on that level. Now, not everyone can do that. There is a rule. The rule is, I think Rav Dessa says, what is the rule? How do you know what level of trust in God you are? There's 3 ways a person can react if things go wrong, right? A person can say, okay, I've been working 10 hours a day, Now let's cut it down to 2 hours a day. Can I support my family at that? I want to give it a try. And then he works for 2 hours and it doesn't work. That's the test. How does he react? He could say, no, I believe it's all God. It's just a trick, right? God's just testing me, and he would give me this poverty even if I was working 10 hours. Fine. Okay, that's one attitude, and he keeps going. The second attitude would be, yeah, I'm happy with what I've done so far. I'm glad I pushed myself to have trust in God, but I'm finding it too hard. I can't keep going on like this. It's getting a bit too hard. I don't feel I'm on that level, right? So, but I'm happy I at least tried until now. Okay, that's also good. The third level is where you get problems. If a person says, okay, I spent the last year working 2 hours a day instead of 10. Now my whole finances, I'm in massive debt. Everything's gone wrong. I can't support my family. Oh, I was so stupid to trust in God that much and only work 2 hours. If you have that attitude, what do you mean? You're stupid. You didn't make a mistake. That was true. That was true what you did. The truth is that you would have been in this position even if you had 10 hours a day. Well, how could I have got into so much debt? God's got his way of putting people into debt even if they work a lot. Yeah, he could have made someone have an illness and have to spend massive amounts of doctor's fees and have to borrow money in order to pay it. Yeah, it's a mistake to think that because you did less effort, you received less. It's not cause and effect. It's just the rule. You've got to do something. You've got to pay your tax because of the sin of Adam. Right? It's not. That means the person's not just believing now, going forward, that his actions are connected with, that God's not in charge of the world. Is that it's his effort which does everything. Yeah? He's actually having regret on what he's done before. Now, what's the problem with that? Remember we spoke about repentance being regret. Yeah, a person reaches a higher level. If a person's done the sin and then he regrets it afterwards because now he realizes the falsity in doing the sin and how bad it is. Where if a person would have never done the sin, say, yeah, I know it's the wrong thing to do, yeah, but he hasn't internalized it. Once a person does the wrong thing and he repents on it and he says, oh, that was so stupid, he gets a higher, deeper awareness of how bad the sin is. So a person who does repentance, who repents, he's on a higher level than a person who would have done the right thing in the first place. The same thing happens in this situation, but in a negative way, right? If he wouldn't have tried to work 2 hours instead of 10 hours, what would have happened? He said, yeah, it's 2 hours, maybe one day I'll be a holy person. I can manage with 2 hours, but yeah, it's not for me at the moment. It's too hard, right? Yeah, but it's definitely a good thing on the horizon to maybe aim for eventually one day. But once he's actually done the 2 hours and he realized he can't do it, right? And he's actually upset about what he did, that regret actually brings him onto a higher level of negative awareness. It means that I've actually experienced that God doesn't help in his mind, that God doesn't help you unless you try for yourself. So he's internalized this terrible attitude of thinking that everything's down to me now. Whereas beforehand, he actually at least had the potential to think that God is in charge of everything, and therefore, theoretically, if I work less, God will still give me what I need. Now he's actively destroyed that possibility. He's now fallen to a level where he sees that God, in this person's mistaken eyes, that God is not in charge. Yeah, it's the laws of nature which are important. It's my effort which is important. It would be better if you wouldn't have done that in the first place. So that's how you can tell whether you should push yourself to go onto a higher level. If you push yourself onto, let's say, 10 hours, cut down 1 hour. So yeah, okay, I can see that that's reasonable. There's no reason at all where God couldn't make my business have a bit of a boost. So 9 hours working could equal 10 hours. Yeah, most people could probably do that if they have any inkling of the idea of God being in charge of the world. Going from 10 hours to 1 hour, and then if God forbid they actually end up destroying their finances because of that, yeah, most people would have a serious challenge not thinking they did something stupid. But if a person really believes, nope, I'm going to work for 1 hour, I've got 100% trust in God, there's no way that I'm losing money because of this. I actually have this story in my own life, actually. It's quite amazing. We mentioned before that I had the choice to go into a high-paying job, going to university and things like that. And I decided to stay in spiritual pursuits and go on much lower income and things like that. And then I was looking at my friends who are in university, and I saw an amazing thing. They actually had the same sort of struggles that I did financially. Why? Because they had to pay for the university fees, and eventually, after many years, then they had to get a job, but then they had to pay off their loans and things like that. I said, oh, 1 minute, that's strange. It's like God's hiding the fact that he's actually making me not lose out money. Because my friends who went to university were earning much more than I was. They had so many more expenses to offset it. So in the end, we were struggling around the same amount. I would say I actually did better than them for many years as well. Yeah, I managed to get married younger than them as well because, yeah, I had my livelihood and they were worried about their livelihood. Well, I can't support a family until I finish my course and my training, my degree, then my training, then get a good job. That's how they looked at the world. And they ended up essentially, and even without looking at how much money we earn now, am I happy? Are they happy? Yeah, we're both happy. Both getting on with life. Hopefully they are, right? We're both getting on life, having meaning in their life. Either way, will those extra years in university make a difference to our living our life, right? Even if you say it does affect the money, intrinsically, are we better off in terms of mental and spiritual well-being? No, I wouldn't say they are, right? But anyway, even without that, we see that God's the one in charge. So therefore, if a person says with conviction, I'm going to work 1 hour a day, and absolutely I'm prepared that everything goes wrong, I'm going to still believe that it's God who decided to do that for whatever reason, but it's not because I'm not doing my effort enough, right? You've got to be careful not to minimize your effort just because you're lazy. Then you're using the trust in God as an excuse, essentially. However, if you truly believe that God's the one in charge, right, and that's permanent, you've driven that idea into your heart, and that is not budging, then you could push an hour, you could push a minute. Maybe a minute might be pushing it. For me, it might be a minute's pushing it, right? For me, an hour, 2 hours is it's good if you've got a good plan, whatever, right? And eventually you get onto this level of just buying a lottery ticket. And Rav Zundel, he had such a high level, it's absolutely obvious that even buying the lottery ticket wasn't necessary. I'm just doing it because I've got to pay my tax. That's how he looked at it. So therefore he was essentially on the fourth level. It's just he had to do something, right? Once a person reaches this fourth level, right, they've minimized their hishtadlus, the higher they go, right? So less hours working. Then they get onto the level where it's 0 hours working, like Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, who said there's no point in doing any physical nature dependent actions because nature is just an illusion. Then you start transcending that level and say, Right, so now, like, I'm the level of King David, where he's immune from the influences of feeling that nature's going to drag him down, right? Then you get onto the level of King Solomon, so to speak, right? When it came to eating and physical pleasures, right? Where actually, okay, I don't need the physical world, but actually, the physical world needs me. I want to elevate it. Okay, let's start eating a bit more, and bringing it up, elevating the food. And then King Solomon was at a huge level. I'm going to eat everything I see, right? Drink everything I see, marry as many wives as I can, right? We might speak about that another time. Someone, one of my loyal commentators in the comments asked me a very good question about that. So we might do a special lecture just about that, what was going on there, right? So do the maximum. The same thing's happening here in terms of faith and trust in God and the realization that God's the one who is actually controlling everything and there's no such thing as nature, right? So I'm going to take that illusion which people think is something, and I'm going to do the small amount of effort and realize it's completely God, even though I'm doing something. Even my actions are God moving me and animating me. So therefore, King Jehoshaphat said, I'm going to actually pray, because I feel that if I pray, that's God doing it. King Asa, the higher level you are now, the more you do, right? So it's sort of like an hourglass. Third level, the higher you are, the less you do, right? Because you can handle the fact that you're not going to regret your lack of hishtadlus, right? The fourth level, you literally don't do anything. That's like King Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah, right? Right, where he basically just went to sleep. He didn't do any effort at all. Then the fifth level, you start doing more, because now you can actually convert and sanctify and elevate the physical world and the laws of nature themselves, and reveal that God is the laws of nature are just ways of God acting, and as opposed to it being the laws of nature opposing God, the laws of nature are actually God acting in a way where we sanctify the laws of nature. We unify the potential opposition to God. We actually say that the opposition of God is actually God's action. Yeah, the laws of nature, which are the one thing which can contradict our perception of God in the world, are actually God doing it. So we're elevating the laws of nature. But that's very hard, right? If I go out and actually fight like King David, King Asa said, then I'd feel a bit that it was me doing it. The result of that war, the winning of the battle, would be because I tried a bit more. King David was on such a high level, right, that he could act just like the person on the bottom of the level 3. Physically, he was doing exactly the same things. Like the person who works 12 hours a day. I've got to do all my things because everything depends on me, right? So he does the maximum amount of hishtadlus. King David did the same thing, but with the opposite mindset. He was able to absorb all the potential mistakes that person on the lowest level of level 3 could do, and do loads of effort. He said, I'm going to do loads of effort, and with every single movement, I'm going to be aware that it's God animating my hand, God directing my mind to think how to win this battle. The sword, it's not coming from me. I realize that it's God actually imbuing me with knowledge and skill and everything. And God's just using me as a vessel in this world. That way you sanctify the body. You sanctify your mind. You sanctify your knowledge. You sanctify the laws of nature, the laws of warcraft. Right? Or whatever the situation may be. That's the highest level which a person can get to. Right, and we'll finish off with a very nice Gemara. It's gone quite long. It's a very fundamental, beautiful ideas we've been speaking about here. Right, if you think about these 5 levels correspond to the 5 levels going from the absolute evil to the absolute good. Go back over that lecture. You'll see what we're talking about. The 5th level is the idea of converting evil to become good. Just like King Solomon converted food to become elevated. Right. This is just another example of these 5 levels of the 5th dimension. of the spiritual dimension, going from absolute evil to absolute good, where evil becomes part of the good. It becomes a vessel to serve God. So the Gemara says in Brochus, Tractate Brochus 7b, I think, it says, Kol hanena megia kapoi, Godel mashenema benena megia kapoi yosem yirei shamayim. Greater is it what is said about the person who has benefit from the work of his hands more than a person who fears God. Right? Shenema right? This is all based on the chapter 128 in Psalms. It says the work of your hand that you eat, ashrecha v'tovlach. Praiseworthy are you, v'tovlach, and it will be good for you. Right? Ashrecha b'olam hazeh v'tovlach b'olam haba. You're praiseworthy in this world, and it will be good for you in the world to come. Right? Ve'ilu b'yirei shamayim ashrei v'tovlach lo ksiv bei. Right? If you look at the very first chapter there, verse there in that chapter, we'll bring it up for your convenience there. Very short chapter here. Right? Ashrei kol yirei Hashem. Praiseworthy is any man who fears God. Right? But then it speaks about someone else. Yegia kapecho kisechel. If you eat the toil of your hands, read the English here, ashrecha v'tovlach, you're praiseworthy and it'll be good for you. Right. So, if you look at what's going on here, actually Rashi points out it's actually 8a. What? 8a? That's not right. 7b. Is it? I'll have to check that out later. 1 minute, I'm going to check it up now. Well, after checking up, I was wrong. Yes, I have to do more revision. I thought it was 7b. It's actually 8a. Right. Okay. Rashi says the toil of your hands, he who benefits from the toil of his hands inherits 2 worlds. Right. That's what the Talmud in Tractate Brochus says, 8-8. Ashrecha. Let's get my pointer on it. Ashrecha. Means, you see, it's the same word, Aleph Shin Resh Yud, as this word here, and this word here is essentially the same word, right? Ashrecha, it's praiseworthy for you. V'toivloch, and it's good for you, and good for you in the world to come. That's how the Talmud says there. But by the Yirei Shamayim, the one who fears God, it doesn't say v'toivloch. So people think, yeah, okay, so the person who works in this world, who puts effort in, he gets both worlds. People understand, yeah, okay, you're doing the right thing, and you get benefit in this world. Whereas a person who just has faith in God, yeah, he only gets one of the worlds. Which world does the person having faith in God have? He gets the world to come, but he doesn't have such a nice world here because he doesn't have the physical benefits of like having a nice livelihood, right? But actually, if you look very carefully at the which words are used here, it's the other way around. It's absolutely astounding if you've worked this out already. Ashrecha, we say in the second verse, praiseworthy in this world, v'toivloch, and good for you in the world to come. But in this one, it doesn't say good for you. It only says ashrei, praiseworthy. So that means that really, if you're going to be precise with the meanings of these words, ashrei is referring to this world. That means the one who fears God is praiseworthy in this world, but he doesn't get the world to come. The question is, what on earth does that mean? The person who has faith in God doesn't get the world to come. What's that mean? The answer is, like we've been saying, yeah, a person who just, I fear God, I'm on the 4th level, right, of trusting God. Total trust in God. I'm not going to do any effort at all. So what do you get? What's going to happen in this world? He's very praiseworthy. Wow, you're on a very high level. God's going to take care of you. You're going to get everything you need in this world. Oh, fine. Ashrecha in this world. Right? But in the world to come, I'm sure you're going to, obviously the person's going to get rewarded for the Torah and mitzvahs, the commandments and the studying and the spiritual pursuits he does, but he's not going to get rewarded for the effort he puts in. Whereas the person who actually does effort and actually goes into the world, and we're talking about the fifth level now, the ideal level. And remember, even if we're on that third level, we can at least once here and there try to be on that fifth level, right? We can say like we said, a person stacking shelves, I'm doing this, God's helping me, He's with me, He's giving me strength, He's giving me the intelligence to know where to put everything, yeah? A person could be doing an intellectual job beforehand. You think God's going to give me the wisdom in order to do my job properly, right? And then when He's doing the effort, yeah, you're touching on that fifth level, right? You might not be permanently on there. You might have to do it consciously, and what might not be automatic, like maybe King David might have been. But at least you're touching on that amazing level of perfection there. You're tasting it, right? You're sanctifying this world. In fact, in the Code of Jewish law, we're commanded to do that. It says, all your actions should be for the sake of heaven, right? Which means try to do that. Try, if you're anyway doing physical work and involved in the physical world, sanctify it. Do your best. Come on, elevate it. Just think. Just like we spoke about eating meat. You're eating meat anyway. Just think, I'm doing it to get strength to serve God. That elevates the meat. Here as well, any action we do, as long as it's permitted, we can elevate it. Right? So therefore, the person who's Yikiach Kapecha, who benefits from the work of his hands, he's happy in this world because, again, he's having faith in God and God's providing for him. But for Tovloch, he gets rewarded for the physical effort he does. When he buys and sells, he's realizing God's putting these ideas in my hand. He's constantly in a state of ecstasy, of happiness, that God's with him the whole time, right? When I'm buying, I'm selling, I'm doing anything, I'm realizing, wow. On one level, okay, we got the level of free will, but on one level, God is literally with me, and I'm a personification of God's power in the world. I'm channeling God's power in the world. I realize God's the one giving me the ideas. I'm the one who's realizing God's giving me the energy and the power and the skill to do all these complex types of work, whatever it may be. The buying and selling, getting the right ideas, the idea to buy the right things, right? Right? So Tovlach Lamaboy, he gets the world to come because he's actually sanctified the physical world and the rules of nature and his own ego, his own feeling that I'm the one being successful. No, it's God who's making me successful. So he gets rewarded for the effort he's doing. So therefore he gets the world to come for his efforts. Whereas a person who just sits back and just has trust in God, he might get rewarded for the trust, but he hasn't got rewarded for the physical bringing the success into the world. God's giving him the blessing and the success despite his lack of actions. It's irrelevant. It's got nothing to do with him. God's just doing it. Thank you, God. I'm benefiting in this world. God's being nice to me. Yeah, but I'm not helping bring God into the world, right? Whereas a person who works and does it for the right reasons, he's actually bringing God into the world through his efforts. And therefore he gets rewarded for that in the world to come. Because he's, like we said, he's brought the spiritual into the physical. He's elevated the physical. He's given the physical meaning. Right? Just like the soul giving the body meaning and experience of God. I've given the laws of nature themselves the experience of God who's behind them. I've connected God with nature. I've connected the heaven and the earth. I've connected the Hashem Hu Elokim, Yukevovke, God himself, with the fact that he is the one in charge of all powers of the world. Like we said in chapter 4, verse 39 in Deuteronomy there. Yeah, we're unifying everything. We're bringing everything, the high and the low together, and we're unifying it. We're showing that Eino Mavada, there's only God. Like we said, that is the purpose of everything, like we spoke about in the third Keystone lecture. And that is the very broad topic of Emunah Bitachon, faith and trust in God, and the idea of different levels of trust. We spoke about these 5, how to internalize it first. First you have to know, then you have to believe and have conviction, and then when you have conviction, you act upon it. You don't work 10 hours, you work 5 hours, you work 2 hours, as long as you're not going to regret it. You have to be sure of that before you try pushing yourself too hard, because you don't want to cause more damage than you would have caused benefit. And then we speak about these 5 levels. We'll eventually get into the 5th level, where you've got the spectrum of the more you do, the better, because the more you're sanctifying, until you get to the level of King David, where you're acting like a regular person, but with a completely different mindset, right? So you get level 3, the higher you are, the less you do. Level 4, you don't do anything. Level 5, you do more and more and more, until you get to that ultimate level of doing everything, right? And realizing it's all God, right? Which is the highest level of revealing God's oneness in the world. That even me, my effort, even the laws of nature is all God. And you bring a very, very, very deep rectification and sanctification to the laws of nature themselves. It's a beautiful idea. All right, it's a very long lecture, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. And if you got all the way to the end, thank you very much. And we hope to see you in the next lecture. Thanks very much, and all the best. Bye.